So hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. Like Ezra said, I'm Trista Van. I'm super excited to be part of this inaugural Midwest House Summit. Um, we wanted to do this as a fireside chat because we're talking about, we wanted to be a little more fluid, a little more human. So it's going to be more of a discussion between Kevin and I. It's a topic that we're both super passionate about, human connection, something that touches people, something that, we think, how teams actually operate in the real world today. Our theme is called the unscalable connection. It really comes from this tension that we think that we're all kind of feeling right now. Everything around us is really, promising all this massive scale, AI models, automation, instant reach. But the thing that I think that Kevin and I both kind of think is really moving people forward is about, the opposite of that. It's about small circles, micro networks, and real relationships with humans. So Kevin's with me today, and Kevin is originally from Chicago, so he's also a Midwesterner. Really excited to have him here. So Kevin, maybe we want to introduce ourselves. You want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ted and Emily and Midwest House and Ezra and Bamboo. And thank you, Trista, for inviting me for this chat today. Yeah, as you said, I'm very excited. We have a lot of similar thoughts on big networks, small networks, the values of both and the gaps between. But I'm just excited to be here. Yes, from Chicago, so definitely consider myself a Midwesterner. I'll share a little bit more about that. I was just recently in Detroit for a wedding just a few months ago for my niece. So I'm glad to be back. You want to do a longer introduction?
Yeah. I mean, why don't you share a little bit more about your background? Like, I think, I'm really excited to talk about social networks with you, especially because you're a product designer at LinkedIn. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of Ninchi. We're trying to build a new operating system for relationship intelligence, specifically to help multi-stakeholder relationship and people management. Before that, I co-founded and built Michigan Founders Fund, Michigan Tech Week. I've also been on the leadership teams of multiple different companies across a couple different continents in the biotech industry, the education space, and media. So I've seen a lot of different things over the years. I've seen a lot of things go well, a lot of things go poorly, and learned about how multicultural teams operate and struggle. And that really kind of led to this inevitability of what we're trying to accomplish in building Ninchi, and kind of what we're going to talk about too in this discussion with Kevin.
So I'm one of those people that right after college, I headed west. So I landed in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I spent my entire career out there. And I've been leading product and design teams at just about every type of environment, from agencies, including one that I founded, lots of startups, big and small, including a couple for a celebrity, one that was kind of a hybrid social network. And then also working in-house at bigger companies as well. Verizon, 23andMe, and as you said, for this conversation, LinkedIn. And, I've been on this journey for a lot of years in design and tech. And I should mention that my wife is also in design. And so we've worked together for more than half our careers. And so we wrote a book called The Design Career Handbook to help designers more specifically navigate the world of tech. And I'm writing another book right now about career longevity. But as Ezra said, I consult, I advise, and I certainly mentor in the design and tech communities as well.
Okay, so let's start with social networks first. This is obvious. This is what, Ninchi kind of like resembles a social network. We talked already about LinkedIn. These have been around for a long time. MySpace, Facebook, relationship building software. Because you're a product designer at LinkedIn, I'm especially interested in your thoughts and your experience on what did they get right and have they drifted over time?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about social networking, which I've spent a lot of time in, just some of the ones that you mentioned, like if they think about the old ones to start with, like MySpace and LinkedIn started around 2003, Facebook 2004, if you count Twitter 2006, and they all really started with the right intention to like build community. And I'd say some of the good things are really that they did create a decent model for connections online. And of course, sharing information at scale, at speed, and, across boundaries. So, they did get a lot of things right. But one thing in particular that I thought was valuable to think about is that Facebook and LinkedIn, of course, they did a decent job in the beginning of blending personal and professional networks and certainly started to help businesses connect to customers. And so all that stuff sounds really great. And, I certainly owe a lot of my own jobs that I've had in my career and clients during freelance times to, a very strong professional network. So I think that LinkedIn in particular, obviously, I joined back in 2005. I can't believe that's like 20 years ago. But today they have 1.1 billion members. I mean, that's pretty huge. So of course I was excited to work there. A few years back, I led design teams for 3 consumer areas like the profile, search, and messaging. So I definitely talk about the value of LinkedIn a lot, but I do kind of keep it in the same bucket as all the other social networks. And I think about the bad things or less exciting things is, of course, they all have to grow. They have to grow, which means more features, which means more engagement models, which means more content, and they just get too big. Then you start to get concerned about data privacy and data capture. So I think that's the big problem with like social networks historically. I do think LinkedIn in particular, as I said, it's a crucial network. It's really important for a lot of people to reach others, but it has a lot of shortcomings being so huge. Like I think about some of the features, whether they're events or conversations and the community stuff. Now they're much better served by other types of smaller, more purpose-built platforms. You think about like meetup.com or Slack groups, for example, or even Reddit and Discord, things like that. So, they're just too big. That's the bottom line. I was thinking about before our talk and going all the way back to 2010. So this is quite a long time ago already. There was a founder that I met one time, Dave Morin. I don't know if anybody remembers his name. He was an early operator at Facebook, but he left all the way back then to co-found a company called Path, which was already on a mission to like recapture the value of a smaller network. And I can only imagine, like fast forwarding 15 more years, you must have seen even more. And what's your experience been with like all the social networks?
Mhm. Yeah. I remember the path and he capped. Does anyone else remember path? Like where he capped people, like limiting like their friends to like, I think it was like 50. You
Hmm.
could only have 50 friends. But um, so for me, and this feels like forever ago too, like Facebook, when I was living internationally, social networks were like a lifeline for me. Like back in 2008, 2009, when I was in Korea, Facebook actually became like my way to feel like I was still part of the lives of a lot of my friends and family back in the US, to like keep in touch with what they were doing, how they were using it, like their photos and their stories. And I actually felt like I was part of their life still. And actually my computer in general, and just like using FaceTime and keeping up with them, and that became part of my graduate school essay. Actually, was talking about that computer and that interaction becoming my way of maintaining relationships with people. um and then even in different other parts of my life, like in 2010 when I was living abroad in the UK, and then 2017 when I was in Switzerland, using Meetup as like a first way when I was in different cities to find some community, just with people who are expats and locals in those cities. Just with that initial, like people who had shared hobbies and shared interests, to just quickly, like as a jumping off point, find people who had like, were interested in the same sport or activity, or like just to quickly meet people in a new city because I was new there. It was a great way to do that. And that fundamentally, I think those kinds of tools were so invaluable and powerful and really changed how people form communities. And that's why, like, I think that they still like hold this, like, momentous, like, capacity to really do a lot of positive things for all of us, and for everyone in the room. But there's something that we're losing now because we've also normalized this digital culture to a degree where we do digital first instead of like being in these spaces together. Which is why I love like what Tad and Midwest House do, and really trying to put like the in real life experience first. But yeah, and like when you talk about what happens when they get so big? So they're all trying to grow, and like success is you have the most users. But what happens once you hit that massive scale, then, which most of those did, like Facebook and LinkedIn, then you're inherently sacrificing something, right? Like, so in the cold start problem, it's always like, well, what do you do? Like, when you're building a network based product, like you start by like, oh, how do I get enough users? But then the opposite is true, where once you actually have all those users, then you have a new problem, which is called carrying capacity, where you've hit so many. Now, like, your product actually is like starts to degrade because you're sacrificing like quality, right? And then what do you do? And social, we're talking about social networks, but back in the early 2000s, there was this silent shift. They're actually social media. Like they silently started becoming social media and moved from this promise of connection to the pushing of content. And, nobody really talked about that, but that's powerful, and the incentives are totally different. And I think we have to acknowledge that, that promise of, connection, it's not there anymore.
Really lost a
So
bit.
yeah, like just competing for attention rather than aiming for quality. And that's why Nucci was so important for us too, is like, how do we get back to this idea of putting like the quality of nurturing human relationships and connection first, right? Um, Rather than competing for that attention. Because when you achieve scale, you do lose something along the way. And I don't know if anyone pays attention to social networks, but this last year, a lot of people have been trying to build, especially in this era of AI, new social networks. Like Ev Williams, he was one of the original co founders of Twitter. Earlier this year, he launched a new social platform called Mozi, with the promise of like, let's put social back, like put social first again. There's been another influx of apps and companies trying to build a new relationship operating system, or saying we're going to build the AI for social, like 40 series 222. Gen Z is building a whole wave of like vertically integrated community based platforms. All with this promise of like, hey, we want to do something different. It's time to disrupt this industry. And we need to get back to, like this human to human element again. VCs are also putting out this call to people, especially in the last 3 to 6 months, saying like building theses around, we want to see someone build a new relationship operating system, when just 18 months ago, they really didn't care, right? And I know this firsthand. They would say, okay, well, this idea of this, like our failing relationships and disconnection, this is the obvious problem. Everyone knows this has been a problem. Everyone's been saying for 20 years they're going to build a new social network. Everyone wants to go after a Facebook. Like, whatever, I don't care. But now, like this past like 12 months, like we're seeing just like an influx of people actually trying to do something different. But this is actually just talking about kind of the user experience side of it. From a business model standpoint, the reason that we have to suffer through kind of this doom scrolling and psychological product warfare, is because no one has yet cracked that code of monetizing something that incentivizes the company to do what's in the best interest of the end user. So social networks, I think the question is like, are they actually evil, or are incentives just inherently misaligned? And founders have to think about that. They have to think about like, who is paying for the product, and what does that mean for the experiences that they're building and that they have to build before they ever take that first check too, because the incentives of the investors aren't always aligned, and investors have to think about the LPs, because they have to answer to them and they have to generate returns. And honestly, VCs are always fundraising just as much as founders are fundraising too. So I kind of wanted to shift to that because this is especially true of coastal farms in the valley. And I want to talk about that with you, Kevin, because you live there now. You've built most of your career there. And I think people still are really glamorizing Silicon Valley. Startups are launching there. The AI bubble is still really focused on Silicon Valley. So it remains the major hub. Do you think that we're over glamorizing Silicon Valley still? Is there a gap in the perception versus the reality?
Yeah. I mean, I love everything that you said, especially about investing in new models again to recapture the social. But yeah, Silicon Valley, and the good thing is we all know, I mean, people are building everywhere now. So that's pretty reassuring and pretty amazing. I absolutely think I'm very jaded because I've been there for so long. So I think Silicon Valley still has it has more perceived value than actual cachet. I had this kind of joke about it being like a luxury brand. I'm like, the quality is the same as something else, but it's just got this name. That being said, I can't deny that there's still outsized influence just because of the concentration of like VCs and capital. I mean, it really is everywhere. The talent density is super high. People still think they need to go to the coasts, whether it's New York or Silicon Valley, San Francisco. And, it's just there. It's still there. There's still thousands of tech companies there specifically. There's tens of thousands of startups. There's headquarters everywhere, super campuses everywhere. I still drive around today, anywhere on the peninsula between San Francisco and Oakland, any city, Cupertino, Menlo Park, Sunnyvale, Mountain View, where my company was, all the way down to San Jose. And I'm still surprised. I'm like, oh, I didn't know they were here. Oh, I didn't know they were here. So the density is really, really significant. So you can't deny that just being in person there can have some benefits, just to be able to have those introductions, have those kind of conversations, have those lines. Another kind of joke I have is that no matter where you have lunch or coffee with a friend or a colleague, you're going to be surrounded by people in tech talking about tech. And that all sounds really great, but if anybody caught Kyla's talk earlier, there's a housing crisis there too. It's super expensive. And so there's a lot of negatives that come with those commitments to going out there. I'm very fortunate that I was there before all of that mess that we're in now. So it's a love-hate relationship. I'm ready to move myself. I don't know if I'm moving back to the Midwest, to be honest, but because I'm reminded of the cold. Thank you. Um, one thing I will say though, just kind of pivoting a little bit, is I'm seeing a lot of startups and founders like building in public. Like that's kind of a new thing. People are more openly sharing what they're working on. I think that's cool. Learning together. Maybe some of that's influenced by AI, which we'll talk more about. But there's also still a lot of people in stealth mode. Maybe it still has that secretive, I'm protecting my IP. And I'm kind of curious, getting back to the Midwest, like, do you see the same thing here in communities here? Or do you think there are in other communities like Boston or Austin, that same kind of mix of building?
Like building in stealth mode versus building in public here in the Midwest.
Because it really speaks to the community part of it a little bit.
When I came back to Michigan 5 years ago, and I mean, I don't know, I would maybe put that to the audience too, like being all from the Midwest, but I don't think people in the Midwest tend to build in public as much. And I think that goes back to like that maybe Midwest humble, or maybe just like feeling uncertain about what we're doing, or like, whether we should be building in public, and maybe not being as good at telling our own story. And whether or not we should be, is up for debate. But yeah, we need to do a better job of telling that story. I think the Midwest connection is authentic and real. And I think you can kind of feel that vibe here the last couple of days. But, I think the bigger problem we suffer here goes back to the whole density issue of there's just not enough of everything here. And I'm going to talk specifically about Michigan because that's my experience. Like I've been back for 5 years, and I lived in California for 10 years. I lived in New York, and um, it's true. Like you go anywhere in San Francisco and you're just out for lunch or coffee, and there is the investor sitting there. There are people, and you overhear conversations talking about the next thing they're building, and, new technology. And it's perfectly normal to just, be part of those conversations, but it's rare to just organically find that when you're out having a coffee in Ann Arbor. It's not something that happens as frequently. You have to be more intentional about doing it. So we haven't had enough people having those really outsized, massive wins here, to then reinvest back into the ecosystem. And by that, I mean reinvest their capital and their time back into the next generation of founders, to help grow those founders. And not to say that they can or that there's not enough of that talent to do it, but we just haven't had enough of them to keep building that density. And so I'm hoping that we'll keep seeing more of that happen. But we need more of that. So capital still is a major advantage, I think, on the coasts. Um, but we also need more willingness from people to take risks, for founders to maybe not get paid right away and to fail, but for the rest of the people around them to like help them find a way to take those risks and to fail and for it to be okay, right? Um, and then I think, to try not to be so comfortable and to push ourselves to be uncomfortable. I think we can get a little complacent. And a lot of people, when they come back here, like we're often coming back because of family, or because of other things. Like there's a pullback to our roots, and so there is a level of comfortability, and we have to find ways to stay curious and to keep growing, to do continual learning, and that's where innovation comes. And I think, we always have to challenge ourselves to keep pushing on that front. So that's what I hope for us and like to keep seeing here. But like the density piece is real. And like, so how do we all come together to create more of that kind of density so we have more of that organic opportunity around us, to keep pushing each other to excel, right? but but yeah, but there's a lot of amazing people doing that. We just all have to kind of come together and figure it out. I think that, what I want to shift to is because we're talking about like the human connection piece, but we're also talking about new technology and how AI is impacting, the relationships and the interaction that we're having with each other. There's a lot of talk about the AI bubble that we're in. There's a lot of companies working in or with AI, including myself. Um, is AI helping us solve more problems, do we think? Or is it helping us do it faster and better? Or are we really in a hype bubble? So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So first of all, I first and foremost have always considered myself a technologist. So of course I've been paying attention to AI like everybody else. I talk about it every day, read about it every day. If anybody's seen the drug meme about keeping up with AI news, it's pretty funny. It's worth seeing. That's how I feel for sure. The news, the debates, the research, the product announcements, it's all great. We all know but it's also very polarized, right? Like on one end, it's like AGI or AGI is going to help us solve the world's problems, which is really cool. And then on the other side, of course, is like, haven't you seen 2001 or The Terminator or The Matrix? And I'm a big sci-fi fan. Um, I have a lot of my own biases. I won't say anti-AI, but I was very, very cautious a few years back, and I still maintain my position for the most part. Maybe I'll fall back on a lot of my biases unless we circle back to it. But the one thing that I do tell people, again, because the technologist side of me, I can't let go, is that, I advise people, you have to experiment with these tools. You have to understand their capabilities. And my point ultimately is everybody has to make their own decisions about what they're willing to use it for, where it fits in their professional lives, their personal lives. I see those biases are creeping in because I think like when it comes to, replacing human connection or simply replacing knowledge, it's the same thing I've said to designers specifically with design tools is like, you can't think of them solely as shortcuts. It's more about knowing what you're trying to do. And yes, these tools can help augment things. Yes, they can help speed up things, but that's like a tricky balance. And I just have got to the point where I think everybody has to find their own, I call red line. And I'm kind of respecting everybody's red lines for the most part. But at the end of the day, though, I do think that the hype's going to die down, especially funding based just on AI hype. It does feel a bit like the dot-com days. I mean, not surprisingly for anybody that remembers, the overvaluations, the like long tail of, product market fit and all of that. I mean, I shake my head, on the negative Luddite side and like, do we need 10 more incredibly awesome video generators? Probably not. So I think things will shake out. I get much more excited by headlines like, AI guided robots help restore coral reefs, or the story about the Maori people who were using AI to preserve and revitalize their native language. I mean, those stories are really cool and they get overshadowed by a lot of the hype. And even people building their own like utilities or things that help do small things that aren't necessarily about, I'm starting a startup and I'm, going to jump on the train of trying to find members. So I think there's ways to use AI to like augment what you do. And frankly, I just really hope it dies down because maybe we can all sort of slow down and get back to like some pretty healthy practices of building products.
You were talking to me a lot about the ethics of AI, and I want you to go ahead and like dig into those biases because you felt pretty passionately about being a little bit anti AI. I was
Yeah. I mean, they were really rooted in the most egregious things about a lot of the AI technologies around ethics, frankly. And I'm designer mostly background, and so I have a lot of respect for creativity, a lot of respect for artists, a lot of respect for writers, and just knowing that a lot of the big companies, they literally pirated like terabytes and terabytes of content to train the models, and that's just the really evident things that are documented. And there's much more ethical issues about how models are trained overseas in different countries and all the impacts that those have. I'm trying not to go down a spiral here. Kyla also talked this morning about the environmental impact. So this is my point is like, you have to be informed and decide like what products you're willing to use, why, and to what extent. So that's really my foundation, but I just can't deny. I mean, I also used all the tools coming up, when we were building the first websites and transitioning to online, and digital video. So I can appreciate technology for technology's sake, but everything comes at a cost, right? And, again, back to the human connection, again, referring back to, a brief moment of Kyla's talk about education, I'm also very, very concerned about the educational impacts of AI specifically as well. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be frustrated, but you kind of have to find the good and see where it fits in your own personal goals.
Yeah. And customers ask us that, when I do demos is, are you going to use our data to train your AI, Nucci? And so, this is why we got SOC 2 type 2 compliant. And we tell them that we'll always ask you if we intend to do that we have very specific privacy. Like we give them specific like documents and language that shows them exactly what we're doing with that. And we show them which models we're using. And the reason that we don't use OpenAI's model in ChatGPT is because from a value standpoint, we didn't feel like the way that they were training their models aligned with our values as a company. And that's why we actually used Anthropic's models instead. So completely understand on the ethics piece, like you really have to do what's best for you and what you think serves your customers. And you've got to be prepared to answer those questions when they come to you too, if you're going to work with AI. Um, yeah, like in terms of how you think, because you talked about, education, you talked about like, um, as a designer and, as someone in the creative industry, I think you touched a bit about how it's impacted friends in the creative industry. Like, do you think that it's had an outsized impact on jobs and the job market?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's kind of funny thinking about like the AI impact on jobs. We're still dealing with like I say reeling from, the overhiring that happened in tech, massive layoffs, AI, a lot of people believe has became another reason to do more layoffs. But it is true, like especially a lot of the big companies, they really are expecting people to do more with less, do things faster. So it's all about resourcing at the end of the day. And I definitely, I talk to friends. I talk to job seekers all the time. I think the thing that I most fear is the impact on entry level jobs. I mean, as Kyla said, like people getting their foot in the door, it's really, really hard right now. And this is part of a bigger problem. But even people that are working, they're still struggling as well. I mean, we're a couple of years into this now, and I talk to friends and former colleagues at a lot of large companies. I'm sure you'll know every name, and they're still trying to figure out how does AI help me do my job? I'm being asked to use it. How does it help me do my job? And in fact, questioning like, how is this helping the business? And I think a lot of it's like lingering frustrations over all these budgets and resource shifts that went to AI initiatives. So it's the hype train, right? So every company trying to figure out where AI fits. And, again, I get it. We understand it. It's back to the whole issue of capitalism. But, to quote one MIT research study, it's like 95% of the AI initiatives at large companies failed or underperforming. I mean, there might be some interpretation of what that means, but it's also not surprising to me. I mean, when we came up through the 90s and the 2000s, this buzzword was like digital transformation. And it didn't take 1 year. It took like 5 to 7 years for people, large companies especially, to kind of move the needle and understand how to really capitalize. And so there's just a lot of churn happening. Um, that being said, friends and colleagues that are working at AI funded, not yeah, funded AI startups, they're still having fun. I think there's still a little bit of a window. They're still trying to find product market fit, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a burst. But again, it all comes back to like experimenting with these tools, understanding what they're used for, how they're used, where they came from, how they can actually do what you do. So I would say experiment, experiment, experiment. And jumping back to, I talked about LinkedIn a little bit and it having some shortcomings. One of the shortcomings for me was it didn't really help me keep in touch with my close network, as we talked about. I mean, I have thousands of connections and I can't find people. So that's been the focus of my own personal experiment. It's like, how do I build a utility that helps me stay on top of my network? And that's not AI generated emails, I promise you. It's about the human part of it, but just helping me stay on top of it. Um, and I'm sure you as well saw like gaps and begging back to networks, gaps in these large network models. And, what are the gaps that you saw that led you to, build Nunchi? And how do you think people are finding smaller networks today?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, for us, because we're like B2B, right? So what we're doing now, like the gaps we're solving, it's actually in stages for our customers. Like we're actually solving a data gap first, data management, fundamentally. But like the bigger vision of what we're doing, there's a thesis around it that going back to my earlier comments around all these social networks have hit carrying capacity. What I really believe is that online is hit carrying capacity, right? Where we've normalized digital culture to such a point that, we're going to see this backlash and we're already starting to see it and see signs of it where people really are reverting back to wanting this first principles of humanity and this in real life connection and like back to this like smaller, like, social like experience with people again, and that tech has fundamentally altered, how we learn and like having these shared experiences with each other and knowledge diffusion from the sense of like modeling real world behaviors with each other. I also read The Anxious Generation. I don't know if anyone's read it, but it's a great book where a social psychologist talks about what he called the great rewiring of childhood from a play based one to one of a phone based childhood starting in the 2010s, which is about like the rise of mental illness in children, largely driven by, a combination of smartphones, this 24 access to like these all the time phones with the internet, with kind of over parenting and this shift in overall culture and society too. But that led to kind of this crisis in social skills and this ability, this loss of interpersonal interaction in younger generations. And I've seen this in my own family. I've seen this in younger generations. I mentor a lot of youth too. And, so thinking about long term, what are we doing today to like plant these seeds and how are we using all this new technology that's advancing just faster and faster, especially with AI, in a way that's actually going to nurture humans and nurture like human growth for generations to come, right? Because if we don't start rewiring that technology now and like building products with that long term goal in mind today, then it's going to be too late, right? So those are more of like the macro kind of like signals and reasons why. But kind of bringing it back to like the problems to be solved for us, like what we're doing in phases is it's a data management problem that we're trying to address for our customers that leads to like a phase approach to help them better understand and serve the people that they're trying to support. They have a network of stakeholders intergenerational, multi-generational stakeholders where they're really genuinely trying to create value for them, trying to create the right connections for them, trying to help them find the people they need at a specific moment in time. We work with a lot of universities, and I know there was also back to like Kyla and Doug's talk of like this is an interesting inflection point for the university industry too, right? And higher education of, are they gonna figure out who they are now in the era of AI? Which I argue that the higher education system is so critical also to the future of our society because, people still need to learn how to learn. They need to learn how to critically think and to be human, meaning like being with other people and learning like those foundational like interpersonal skills and like and how to build that community and just like use your five senses, right? And like that is so foundational to like those first networks that you form that follow you through the rest of your life and those relationships that you build that are going to help you get those jobs and like, find those, partners, romantic partners or whatever it's going to be for you. That happens in those university settings so often or those educational settings. And, so we have to help them survive, I think. And so anyway, but those are customers for us, like a big customer set for us. And the reason they are is because they have these vast networks of multi-generational stakeholders that they are right now trying to figure out like I've got to connect currently enrolled students to industry professionals, to both undergraduates, graduate students, industry professionals, alumni, as mentors, advisors, coaches for jobs. And I have, KPIs around like showing that we're helping these students get jobs, right? Like, so how do I do that? And like, how do I manage that data, get the right data, help make those right matches, and then show like the outcomes of that and still build this affinity back to the university and help them see like, this amazing like experience that we've helped create for them too. So it's a really interesting time for us to help be part of that journey as well.
Yeah, I love that you talked about the educational component. And I second the Anxious Generation is a fascinating read, lots and lots of data, especially if you have kids or are planning to have kids. Um, j- I think it's coming back to like, well, two things. 2 points I want to reflect on what you said. The first was like in person. Like it's absolutely true that it's a declining skill set. I mentioned my wife earlier, and she's after working in industry for a couple decades, she's been teaching at a community college for the last 10 years. And I can tell you firsthand, because I've met a lot of the students, mentored them, coached them, they're not ready. They're not socially ready. And that's just like basic skills. And I don't mean to sound mean. I'm very concerned about this. And it's getting away from screens and getting back out in the real world and interacting with people, talking to people. Um, stuff that it's just core foundational social skills. But on the fun side, you mentioned like people getting together. I think we were talking about this earlier, like tea rooms.
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw one that was like a trending thing where independent bookstores were having like single mingles, which I'm like, I love bookstores and certainly singles need to mingle. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, there's something about the younger generational need. And that's another part of the AI part that really scares me. It's another part of why I think LinkedIn is, really has an opportunity that it's always been struggled, even while I was there, to capitalize on activation of, college students and recent graduates who don't quite know what to do with it. It's back to the bigger social network problem. It's like everything's blurry now. It's not just about content, but getting back to like, how do you connect with people, hopefully in real life? Um, and by the way, it's not just young people. So I have a former colleague that completely nuked her LinkedIn profile, like deleted it, thousands of connections. And her sole purpose, she told me, she started a new one. She wanted to rebuild her network, smaller, more deliberate people that she
Mhm.
wanted to interact with. So it's part of the same problem that we're talking about, where we have to really foster more of these in-person communities and hopefully get to healthier, even online communities as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And Ted just gave us the 5 minute here, so I'm gonna try to land this, take us home here, do our call to action. So So if we want to build durable human first networks that survive kind of whatever next tech cycle we're going to be, maybe let's talk about what are the most important things people should walk away with. What steps can they take? And we've talked a lot about networking. So maybe what would be some tangible advice that you would give the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you'll reflect on some of this too about the tighter, closer networks. But like one just very, very pragmatic, tactical thing is I literally have this myself and have had it for at least 10 years. Just put a recurring calendar event on your calendar. Mine is literally called Cool People Catch Ups. I kid you not. It just reminds you, like monthly basis. That's what mine is. You know, you can play around with that. It just reminds you to keep in touch with people. I think about not to stack rank my connections, but you know, some people I think hey, well, I need to catch up with these people on a weekly basis or monthly basis or even a biannual basis. So there's a tactical part of it. And just reach out to people. So, you know, if you want like a today thing, like just reach out to 10 people, you know, whether majority of it be people you know catching up, but also reach out to people that you don't know at all levels, like network horizontally, also help people up. You know, I kind of humble brag that I almost respond to every LinkedIn message ever because, you know, I really believe in the power of like helping people, community. So just reach out to people for sure. Um, yeah, any more networking from you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think keep your network circles small. I mean, small, I think, for that could still be as many as like 50 people. But when I say that, but keep it active. Like you've got to keep it active. Build relationships before you need them. Listen first, and always give more than you're asking. Be intentional, really take the time to do your research and really understand people and be thoughtful in your communications with people. And prioritize the people that prioritize you. Because, you really have to be honest with yourself. Like, life is hard. You only have so much to give and, so much time. And especially when you're running a business, it's hard. And, don't try to be everything and all things to all people. And, uh, prioritize the people that prioritize you and think about where your energy goes. And, that can help you maintain some sense of sanity, I think.
Yeah, I love that. It's a lot of advice I give to people about networking, especially that are just starting to do it. I'm really quickly on tech and AI. Of course, stay informed, like read different news sources, not just the kind of blog headlines, like actually follow some research. I also say something I write about in the book that I'm writing now is having a beginner's mind. It's really about this like lifelong learning mindset. I think it's really important for like long-term career growth and resilience. And one last book recommendation, Empire of AI by Karen Howe. If you haven't read it, please read it. It is pretty critical, but it's more focused on open AI, but it really does talk about technology as a whole and across lots of different companies. But it's a very important read.
Yeah. But thank you all so much for being here. Please feel free. Kevin and I will be hanging out. So if you want to chat or just have any questions or just want to talk about anything, please feel free to connect. Connect with us on Nunchi, on LinkedIn. And yeah, and thanks for being here and connect with each other and appreciate you.
Thank you.